Okay, good evening. We're going to start in just a moment. We have a couple of other people that I'm expecting that I'd like to have an opportunity to sign in, and we'll start in about 1 minute. Okay. My name is Jeff Bodmer Turner. I'm the chair of the select board. And tonight we have actually our fifth public safety dispatch forum on looking at the question of regional and in-house dispatch. For those of you who attended the forum in April, I'm going to be using the same slides. There's been some updates and tweaks based on feedback that we got after the first forum, but much of the content will be the same and the process will be very similar. This meeting is being recorded, and there'll be an opportunity for public comment at the end of the meeting. At the end of the presentation. So with that in mind, I'd like to invite Mr. Fetterspiel to, are you at full screen, Greg?
Do you see it in full?
I can't hear you, you're muted.
You can't hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Can you see the full screen?
I can see the screen, yes. So we ready to go?
Yeah, if it would advance. Why is it not advancing? Well, that's odd. It worked before we got started.
This will be a briefer presentation than the last.
Yes.
Greg, why don't you?
I'll stop sharing for a minute.
Yeah.
And try again. Well, why isn't it not advancing?
Have you quit out of the program and reopened it?
Yeah, let me do that. Hold on. Let's try this again. All right. Not sure what that hiccup was about. Sorry.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay, so we're going to start out just to put this into context with a little bit of the background history on dispatch in Manchester by the Sea and come up to the point where we can address the question about why are we still talking about this. As far back as 2005, there were early discussions about setting up a regional center to provide dispatch services in Essex County. And in 2009, a study recommended that our fire department would benefit from services of a regional dispatch center. In 2015, Manchester did a study of the pros and cons of joining what was then called the Essex Regional Emergency Call Center, EREC, and that was done for the town. And in 2017, after rejecting joining the REC, the town looked into the option of joining forces with Danvers, which was starting as part of their new police headquarters, their own small regional dispatch. Finally, in 2019, a study looking into shared service options with the town of Essex recommended that Manchester revisit the option of joining what was now called the North Shore Regional 911 Center, which was under the auspices of the state as opposed to the Essex County Sheriff's Department. Next slide, please. In Manchester, our current operation is that we have one dispatcher on duty 24/7. In the instance of a large event or a multi-agency event, a second dispatcher can be called in. Generally, the timing is about 15 to 20 minutes for them to arrive. And although that time has been exceeded by some incidents in the past, upwards to 30 to 40 minutes. There are 3 full-time dispatchers, excuse me, covering weekday shifts. And on the weekends, there's been a recent change to hiring dispatchers who are just dispatchers covering the weekend shifts, 24 hours for both the weekend days. Manchester by the Sea police officers work overtime, covering some weekends and backfilling on shifts as needed during the week. If there's an anticipated critical incident, and one might ask, what could that be? I would answer that that would be a storm that was predicted, a catastrophic storm that might be predicted. And at that point, dispatch may increase in a planned way to 2 dispatchers until the duration of that event is over. There are 2 operator terminals in the police station lobby that face the police station lobby through a small window. And they provide dispatch and monitor local police and radio channels throughout the shift. They also monitor town DPW radios and the Marine channels 16 and 9. Next slide, please. One aspect of our dispatch coverage is that they respond to walk-ins into the police station. As I said, there's a small window that looks out on the police lobby, and the dispatcher responds to persons entering the police station lobby area. These walk-ins on a daily average, just over 1 person a day in a 24-hour day. Most walk-ins occur during the daytime, during the 8 to 4 business hours of the station. Infrequently, there are evening entries as well. Very infrequently, there are overnight entries. In fact, I think that's almost nil. In a report from the chief of police, who's worked for our police department for the past 30 years, he recalls only one case of a person rushing into the station in an emergency over that whole entire 30-year period. Most of the other walk-ins are for general town information, lost and found property, location of toilet facilities or other directions within the town. Next slide, please. The technology of our current dispatch is one of the areas where we have major concerns. We have 911 answering equipment. Last time I presented this, I said there was a CAD system, a computer-aided dispatch system, but that's not accurate. I was informed that that's not the way that the system works. It's not a CAD system yet. And we would need to install a CAD system and train all our dispatchers on it if we were to do so. The dispatch is located in the police department, and police dispatch consists of the law enforcement record management system interface and mobile data terminals in the vehicles that, the public safety vehicles that are out on the road. There is a multi-module record management system for tracking all records. And there are a variety of modules that exist that are different for both the police and fire. The most important aspect of the RMS, the records management system, is that the fire department RMS is not integrated into the police system used for dispatch. And this can cause difficulties. The mobile data terminals that are in the vehicles are available in all police vehicles. There are mobile data terminals in the 2 fire department ambulances, but there are 4 fire department vehicles without mobile data terminals. That is, terminals that can communicate with dispatch while they are out responding on a call. There's a radio system that's also part of dispatch technology, and that radio system is the primary means of communication between officers and firefighters on the scene with the local dispatcher. These were, the radios were updated for both police and fire last summer in August of 2021. At the time that this presentation was first put together, I was told by both the police and the fire chiefs that there were coverage gaps in the Magnolia area of Manchester. There's been some effort to mitigate those gaps, although they haven't been completely covered at this point. There are backup power supplies installed at the transmitting location on the water tower. And there is a lack of a generator to power that backup supply in an outage. So why are we revisiting regional public safety dispatch? There's several reasons that we're doing this. One was that it was brought to our attention that we should probably consider it by the regional study that was done with Essex. But probably the biggest reason is what I refer to as, and the board refers to as, low frequency, high risk events. These are emergency medical response calls that require a dedicated dispatcher until on-site personnel secure the patient. So emergency medical response calls would be what most people think of as 911 calls coming in which the dispatcher dispatches an ambulance. The average number of EMR calls to our dispatch during the year is 540, or about 1.5 a day on average. And that's an average between 2018 and 2021. Sometimes more than one call comes in at once, and simultaneous 911 calls occur between 55 and 75 times a year over that same period of 2018 to 21. Simultaneous calls can require multiple dispatchers. If you're on the phone as a dispatcher with someone who's calling in who's in a medical emergency, the recommended protocol is that you stay with that person until the dispatch personnel can reach the site and secure the patient. If that's the case and another 911 call comes in, it's very hard to manage both calls simultaneously. That's a time when other dispatchers may be called into the office. Mutual aid response involves ongoing monitoring by dispatcher, particularly when it's a multi-agency response, such as a major automobile accident out on 128 or a mutual aid fire response. Finally, a low frequency but very high risk event is what's referred to as a Firefighter May Day event. And a May Day event is when a firefighter becomes trapped in a building and requires supportive rescue from the other people who are on the site. And that requires a dedicated dispatcher throughout the incident. There have been a lot of changes in available dispatcher personnel. These have been driven by police reform legislation on the state level, which requires that reserve officers have the same training as regular full-time police officers. And that has reduced the availability of reserve officers for shifts. The police department has responded to this need by hiring full-time dispatchers on the weekends, which is when reserve officers were primarily being used, and so that the reliance on reserve officers has been reduced. These are new dispatchers who need to get to know the area. There's also costly police officer overtime for weekends and backfilling of vacation time and sick time in the dispatch center. One of the most critical areas in my mind, and aside from the operational issues, is the need to sort out technology integration, software compatibility, and radio coverage for both police and fire. They're working on radio coverage right now, but the issues of software compatibility and the integration of the technology, particularly with the CAD system, is something that has been discussed but is not being implemented at this point. This is a costly change in that not just the software cost and the equipment cost, the capital costs, but also the amount of training that's necessary to bring officers who are dispatch officers who are manning the dispatch consoles up to speed in training. The training consists of at least 40 hours of on-site and simulated training. And that's a costly thing to do. The need to upgrade, right now we have a single internet service provider, and if our internet service provider connection should go down, we would have an interruption in service. The internet services are an integral part of how dispatch is run and communication is run. And so we need to develop what's called a redundant internet service provider as part of our technical capacity. And it would be basically having a backup internet service provider if our main service provider went down in a power outage or for other reasons. Okay. Excuse me, pardon me, I have a cough that I'm dealing with. North Shore 911 center operations are currently providing dispatch services to 4 towns in the city in the North Shore: Essex, Middleton, Topsfield, Wenham, and the city of Amesbury. At this time, North Reading and Linfield have engaged North Shore 911 with a request for feasibility studies, such as the one that Manchester just went through starting last October. Several other communities, are also considering joining. Current dispatch center operation at the regional center is 4 telecommunicators between 8 a.m. and midnight, and 3 telecommunicators between midnight and 8 a.m. In addition, on each of those shifts, there's at least one supervisor who can move in and take over a console if needed. There are 10 workstations within the regional operation, so there's room for expansion, and there's room for daytime, all 5 telecommunicators, including the supervisor, to be on a console of their own. There's also a complete backup center in Andover for the regional operation if, for some reason, the regional operation should go down. The technology that they use is called Central Square IMC. It's a CAD system, that is a computer-aided dispatch system that's compatible with the modules for both fire and police. CAD system integration is a very important part of updating technology for our dispatch service. It provides mapping. It provides a server interface with both police and fire record management systems. Allows for patient care reports, field operations, paging, that is paging, dispatch, paging, public safety services in the field, and paging the dispatcher back from the field. Crash reports, automatic vehicle location, and various state databases as well. It's a very good system, and it's been in operation, and their operators are trained on it. Mobile data terminals run what's called IMC Mobile, and they have various services that are available to them, including access to their record management system and being in touch with dispatch to deal with command situations in the field. The mapping and GIS abilities of this system include putting in what are called GIS overlays. These are map overlays that can be put on a specific town to describe areas that wouldn't necessarily show up in a Google map. So Dexter Pond would show up in a Google map, and that would be part of the GIS. The overlay could put in other things like Stinky Beach or other local landmarks. The dispatchers, the North Shore 911 coordinates with all the local municipal assessors of the towns in their area to maintain their map accuracy. So they're updating to our local municipal maps every year. Their radio system connects to our current UHF system that was the one that we updated to last summer. And they're working on further refinement and improvement of their radio infrastructure. They have the capacity for fire station alerting, which to a layperson sounds like something that would be an obvious thing. But fire station alerting involves both signaling and voice communication with fire stations. Currently, 181 out of 351 communities statewide have regional 911 services. All over the state, there are regional 911 services, mostly in smaller towns like ours. So there are two options before us. One is to substantially enhance current operations. And the second is to join North Shore Regional 911 and avail ourselves of the operational capacity that they have for dispatch. There is not an option to stay pat. We have recognized in the work of researching this that there are very significant structural issues in our dispatch system. I don't want to say in any way, shape, or form that our dispatchers are unqualified or not capable of doing their jobs. But the structure of the system is seriously deficient and needs to be addressed. Any one of those high risk, low frequency situations that I described earlier can overwhelm our dispatch readily. And that has happened in the past. It doesn't happen frequently. That's why it's a low frequency event. But when it does happen, it can have very serious consequences. So that's not about the capability of our dispatchers. That is about the way that our dispatch is structured. So we do need to substantially enhance our current operations if we are to remain in-house. And that's going to cost the town money. Next slide, please. Some of the expressed concerns are simultaneous 911 calls requiring dispatch of some public safety personnel. Very low number relative to the total number of calls, between 60 and 75 a year. But that's enough to consider that that's between 5 and 6 a month when there's simultaneous 911 calls. A time delay in bringing in an on-call dispatcher of 15 to 20 plus minutes. And as I mentioned, there was at least one incident in the past year where there was a time delay of 30 to 40 minutes for the second dispatcher to be able to get to the station. And that was very unfortunate, but that's what happened. There's a disparity and a lack of integration between police and fire software systems and a lack of an integrated computer-aided dispatch system of software. Computer-aided dispatch is something that when you call in, identifies your location. The dispatcher looking on the console knows where the call is coming from. And regardless of how the area that the person is in might be named, they have a GPS location of where that call is coming from. There's a progressive loss of reserve officers. We've mentioned that, available for weekend and backfill. And we're currently, the chief of police is currently addressing that situation by hiring regular dispatchers for the weekends as well. There's the issue of the unattended lobby area in the police station if dispatch were to go to regional. There's also the issue of the interruption of dispatch functions by walk-ins. So that's the flip side of this, when someone comes into the station in the middle of a dispatch call and wants to talk to the dispatcher. The next two items I put into quotes: the loss of local knowledge by the dispatcher staff. And this is a situation where a lot has been made of not knowing our local language, our local identifiers, and those things can be addressed by overlay maps and other things that can be done to make sure that the people on the other end, in addition to their GIS location, are able to identify the local area. They would also be talking to local personnel who would be responding to the call and say, they said Stinky Beach. Not to pick on Stinky Beach. Second thing is the familiarity of local staff with the constituents. There's a familiarity that happens over time, perhaps, but all of our dispatch staff, none of our dispatch staff currently lives within the town of Manchester, our regular dispatch staff. That brings up a whole other issue of affordable housing, but the fact of the matter is our local staff is not local. And the last item is the ability to monitor both marine channels 9 and 16. The dispatch center monitors Marine Channel 16. Marine Channel 9 is more of a local chat center. Boats talking back and forth. 16 is an emergency channel, and they do monitor that. So the select board has opted to gauge public interest on this topic by placing a non-binding question on the May 17th town election ballot. The question is, do you recommend that the Board of Selectmen pursue securing public safety dispatch services through the North Shore Regional 911 Center, phasing out our local dispatching operations? Before you change the slide, Greg, when we were discussing how we would put this question to the voters, what we did was research how the state of Massachusetts does this kind of opinion question. And the way that it's done is the question is asked as a yes or no question, not which of these options would you like, but a yes or no question. So it's phrased in this case as, do you recommend that the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Selectmen is being used because the question's already been written and it's on the ballot, pursue securing public safety dispatch services through the North Shore Regional 911 Center, phasing out our local dispatching operations. On state questions, they then have an explanation of what the issues are. Next slide, please. And this is the summary that we have placed on the ballot. For the past 18 months, the Board of Selectmen has been reviewing options for the delivery of public safety dispatch services, primarily to our fire, rescue, and police department. Our current in-house service has deficiencies, including antiquated software and limited staffing for handling large incidents or simultaneous incidents. The town needs to either bolster its in-house operations by providing 2 dispatchers 24/7 or seek services through a regional entity. The state's North Shore 911 Center, Regional 911 Center, has completed a feasibility study confirming its ability to provide the necessary equipment and staffing for dispatch service to the town, and is offering a no-cost contract guaranteed through 2029 and renewable through 2039 with the agreement of the parties. Under the regional model, the town will incur the cost of maintaining a receptionist-staffed lobby for 16 hours a day. Audio-video contact will be available in a secure lobby for the rest of the time. Under the in-house model, dispatchers will provide lobby coverage 24 hours a day. That's the summary of the ballot question. Next slide, please. So the cost comparisons are also included in the ballot question, that over the next 7 years in today's dollars, the Regional 911 Center would involve $20,000 in capital costs, and that's to convert the lobby into a secure lobby that someone could enter and close the door behind them so that no one could enter after them. There would also be 7 years of town operating costs for coverage of the lobby, for 16 hours a day between 8 a.m. and 12 midnight. The cost of those services in terms of operational costs are about 1.31 million. And that's over 7 years. The in-house 911 service capital costs in a 7-year time frame are about $500,000. This is for the capital costs of securing the software and integrating the software with our radio system and other dispatch services that we provide in the technology area. The 7-year town operating costs run at about 5.27 million for a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week, two dispatcher operation. A yes vote means that you're supporting moving to the regional 911 center. A no vote means that you're supporting the increase in town capital and operating costs as described above to update our in-house dispatch service. Next slide, please. Okay, that's the basic lowdown, the facts of the case. At this point, the board will take questions and comments. I would ask, as usual, that you please raise your hand and wait to be addressed by the chair. When you're recognized, please state your full name and street address first before asking your question. Are there any questions or comments? Mr. Coyne. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Oh, good. Thank you again for hearing me and for conducting a very thorough presentation.
Mr. Coyne, could you please identify yourself with your full name and street address?
Robert Coyne, 115 Beach Street.
Thank you.
40-year resident. And again, thank you for conducting this forum. I'd like to begin with, I have just 4 brief points that my support is with Chief Fitzgerald, our Public Safety Director, who strongly is against this relocation because he's going to lose control of this major public safety function. And the proposal of having no dispatchers on from midnight to 8 unattended, I think is really taking steps backwards. I took the effort to go through the town report, and in 2021 there were 1,209 911 calls. 120 of those were from midnight to 8 in the morning. Alarms, 462. 118 were from midnight to 8 in the morning. Walk-ins, 662. 25 from midnight to 8 a.m. That's contrary to the one that was reported, one in 30 years or something. For a total of service calls of 263 from midnight to 8 in the morning. So that is an area that I think is a public service that is in need and should be continued going forward. The dispatchers, we have Katie Elwell as a former police officer with.
Okay, Mr. Coyne, you're piling up a lot of questions here.
Well, they're facts. I just.
Well, I would like to be able to respond as your questions are going on, and because when we get to the end of it, going all the way back to the beginning is going to be challenging. So.
I beg your pardon?
To respond to your questions and your comments, I'd like to be able to respond to them as you make them, rather than have you talk for 3 or 4 minutes, making a lot of comments and questions, raising some questions, and then having to respond to all of them at once.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Your first point was your support was with Chief Fitzgerald. And I think it's really important to recognize that this is not a popularity contest around Chief Fitzgerald or Chief Fitzgerald and Chief Cleary. This is an issue of the services that we provide with dispatch. It's not about the chiefs. It's not about a vote of confidence in either chief, one way or the other. It's about our dispatch services and the structure, the infrastructure of our dispatch services, and the weaknesses that we have recognized in that infrastructure. So I really want to get this away from, this is a vote for Chief Fitzgerald or a vote for Chief Cleary or a vote for whatever. It's a vote regarding the how we address the problems with the infrastructure of our dispatch services. You went through and identified the period of time when there would not be a dispatcher in the station. There will be a dispatcher in the station if we remain in-house. If we choose to go to regional dispatch, there will still be a dispatcher who will pick up the phone when you dial 911. And that dispatcher will dispatch public safety personnel who are town employees of the town of Manchester by the Sea to respond to whatever the concerns in the call are. What's changing here is the location of where the telephone is, where the receiver is that's picking up the 911 call. To say that there's no one in the station from midnight to 8 a.m. would be true if we were working with the model of regional dispatch and coverage in a lobby for walk-ins for 16 hours a day. But as far as dispatch services go, dispatch services would still be 24/7 with redundant backups if it was the regional center. So that's an inaccuracy. You made a comment about the number of walk-ins on the midnight to 8 a.m. shift. And you contrasted it with a statement that I made about 1 in 30 years. I did not say that. What I said was the average number of walk-ins in a 24-hour period is just over one a day. Most of them occur during the daytime hours of 8 to 4. The 1 in 30 years was someone coming to the police station in distress and needing immediate protection. That was from Chief Fitzgerald. He told me that. So I don't want to confound that one person in 30 years with the number of people who come in during the day. The statistics that you're quoting are statistics that come from 1 year. The statistics that I quoted were statistics that were over a number of years, averaging them over those years. We've had a lot of different changes in Manchester during the past 2 years, as we all can attest, under COVID. We went back to 2018 and we brought it up to 2021. The stats for 2022 are not available because it hasn't ended yet. So the statistics that you're quoting were incorporated into a 3-year average going back to pre-COVID times. All right. So with those things in mind, do you have other comments that you wanted to share with us?
Yes, thank you. I guess the main thing about these not having the local dispatch here is to have a police station that is darkened at night, nobody there, for a someone coming off the street or making a call. For a community of this stature, I think it's taken steps backwards in not an additional service for the public. The other point I wanted to make was that this is final if we do commit to go to Middleton. In that dispatch will never come back to Manchester again. So I think it's something that has to really be considered as far as maybe we're a little premature here in going through with this, seeing as there's only 5 towns presently enrolled in this system. And the final point that I would like to make is on the sample ballot that I printed out today that you showed up on the screen. The question, the ballot question down at the bottom has, I think, a bit of confusion to it, in that I'm going to read, it says, a yes vote means that you support moving to the regional 911 center. A no vote means that you support increasing town capital and operating costs. I believe that in keeping in the context, that the no vote should say means that you do not support the regional 911 center, in keeping with what the main question number 1 is. And that's all I have right now, and I appreciate your time.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. I'd like to respond again to the question of no personnel in the station between midnight and 8 a.m. That's not necessarily the case. However, the expectation is that the officers who are on duty are out in the community and either driving or monitoring traffic and are available to respond to a dispatch. Currently, if there is a call on a fire, our fire personnel leave the station and there's no one there. And we don't hear concerns about an empty fire station. We do hear this concern about an empty police station. The police station is not empty. If you call 911, you will reach a dispatcher. If it were that we went to regional dispatch, you will reach a dispatcher who will be in touch with local safety public safety personnel, police or fire, and dispatch them to whatever is the request of the 911 caller. So the phone line is not empty. The lobby between midnight and 8 a.m. does not have a police officer in it, as long as the police are out and monitoring traffic and or responding to other incidents in the community, which is their job. But they are available, and they are available just as they are under our current system, and could return to the station as needed. If someone came into the station in the secure lobby area and needed direct contact with a police officer in the lobby area. So the services are the same in some ways, and they're strengthened in others. Regarding whether the feasibility of joining at this time when there's only 5 communities, and comments that have been made in the past about Amesbury's dissatisfaction with the services, I'm looking at the 2021 report of the regional center in a table called Agency Concerns. For those of you who have downloaded the 2021 report of the regional center, this is page 32. And the percentage of complaints as a percentage of total computer-aided dispatch calls from the communities who are currently involved is a total of 17 complaints out of 76,738 calls, for a total percentage of complaints of 0.02% of the calls were complained about. Several times in these forums, people have made comments about Amesbury. Of those calls, 16,775 were Amesbury calls for either Amesbury police or fire. On the police side, there were no complaints at all. On the fire side, there was one, and it was found to be unfounded. So I think it's important to understand that that kind of a report and those kinds of statistics provide us with the basis for understanding how well received by the communities that are being served the regional center has been.
Jeff,
Yes.
may I respond about the ballot question if you were not going to?
Sure.
I would like to make something clear about the ballot question because I do think that there may be some confusion around it. The decision of whether or not to move to regional or stay here and bolster our internal system is a decision that the board could have made and ultimately will make on its own. The board came to the conclusion that it was going to be one of these two choices that we would pursue, either increasing the funding to bring our dispatch center to resolve its deficiencies, longstanding deficiencies, and bring it into par with what we would get out of, as best we could, is what we would get out of the dispatch center. And the board decided that we wanted to get an opinion from the residents, which of those two options should be supported, or the residents would support. And we purposefully did not say, do you want to go regional or did you not? We wanted to present the residents with the same choice that the board was going to make. So you get to render an opinion about these two options that the board is going to consider. That's the point of the ballot question. And it's not a question of, do you support going to, if you vote no on the ballot question, the message that you're sending to the board is that you support the second option, which is what the board would then pursue, which is to go and get the additional funding, the additional operational funding as expressed in the ballot measure to fund the increases to the police station to bring the dispatch to where it needs to be, the local dispatch. So I want to be really clear about that. It's not a decision of stay where we are or go to the dispatch. It's between these two options that the board is going to choose between.
Thank you. I understand what you're saying. However,
Mr. Coyne,
Yeah.
Coyne, I've got 4 other hands up. I would like to be able to draw other people into this conversation and not just have this be a two-way between you and the board.
okay,
So if you can be patient, I'll be happy to call on you again.
okay,
I'd like to hear from the 4 other people who have their hands up at this point.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Susan Harrington.
Susan Harrington, 0 Woodhome Road. I have 2 questions. What towns, cities have joined the regional center, then opted to leave? That's my question number 1. And then this question number 2, what would be the procedure and cost if we wish to leave the regional center?
Okay. There are 5 towns in the regional center at this point. The city of Amesbury, Essex, Middleton, Topsfield, and Wenham. None of them have left. There was about a year after they joined, there was a move within Amesbury to leave the regional center. And the process of leaving the regional center requires that you connect to another community that has an existing PSAP, an existing public safety access point, and join with them in a small regional center, as we had talked about doing with Danvers some years ago. During the time that Amesbury was looking into doing just that, they were able to resolve the concerns that they had with North Shore 911. And they decided to stay. And as I just indicated from the complaints against 16,775 calls, there were no substantiated complaints in 2021. So that's the process. We would need to go to another town that has a dispatch operation and work out an agreement with them to join with them to share dispatch services.
So in other words, we would not be able to change our mind and have our own local dispatch once we joined the regional center.
We would, just to be clear about what I just said, it would have to be a regional dispatch with another town in our area, perhaps, to share services for dispatch. Dispatch is a professional service. And if we were to join the regional dispatch center, one of the things that we would be doing would be we would be giving up our PSAP. And that PSAP, as you mentioned, would not be restored individually to the town of Manchester by the Sea. Manchester would have to join with another community to form its own small regional dispatch and work out the issues with that regional dispatch operation.
Would we have any cost to the regional center if we wanted to leave? Would it cost us money to?
Susan, that's a very good question. And to my knowledge, there are no costs to leave. The regional center has been very cautious not to hang things over communities' heads in making these decisions. And so that's one of the things that they've let us know. There would be no cost to leave. But there would be costs associated, there could very well be costs associated with starting up a regional agreement with a second partner in the area.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan. Amy Battis.
Status 23C Desmond Ave. In the course of reading some of the press coverage of the Ipswich decision, it looks like they uncovered 2 issues that didn't seem to make the annual reports released by the regional center. One was a 24-hour period last August where they couldn't receive calls at all. And then prior to that, I believe it was in 2020 when they were so overwhelmed by calls related to lightning strikes that the phone lines jammed. And then I believe that at one point during one of the calls we had last year on regional dispatch, I believe it was the gentleman from Amesbury pointed out that the regional center missed one of those firefighter May Day calls. So I'm wondering if the board has taken a look at any of these and if you've received satisfactory answers from the regional center on them.
In what year did the May Day call get missed?
I don't know. It was reported in one of these forums last year. I'm not sure what year it was.
In one of our forums?
One of these forums here. I believe it was the gentleman from Amesbury that was a firefighter in Amesbury that participated on this call.
Right, and I talked to the mayor of Amesbury about that. And he said that that was not an accurate report.
Okay.
Now, you had another part to your question. I want to make sure that.
Yeah, there were two things that were uncovered by Ipswich. One was the 24-hour outage, and one was the phone lines being jammed during a line of storms that either where there were lightning strikes and power outages, and no calls could get through at all.
I'm unaware of either of those two incidents. What we have been informed is if there is an inability, as you said, to have calls picked up in Middleton, that there is an entire operational system in Andover that backs them up. And whether that system was engaged or not, I don't know. I think it's important to go to the sources of information and not just rely on statements that are made that may or may not be accurate. I'm not saying that those statements aren't accurate, but I think it's really important to go to the sources of information. And I can follow up on those.
I know the 24-hour period was definitely stated as August of 2021.
August of 21. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
August. Did you have a date?
There was no date. It just said August of 2021.
Okay. And then a separate period where there were lightning strikes. Those are two separate incidences.
Two separate incidences, and that was reported as phone lines jammed for a period of time, but not a 24-hour period of time.
Okay.
Thank you.
I will follow up on those and we could report that back out on Monday, the 16th.
Okay,
At our next board meeting.
thank you.
Thank you for bringing those to my attention, Ava. Okay, next would be Kathy Bellata.
Hi, Kathy Bellata, 21 Pine Street. One question and one comment. This gets to the software that you were describing, the integrated platform that's at the regional center. I recall in one of the prior documents, I believe it could have been the feasibility study, and I think some comments made at one of our prior forums, that if we chose to go to the regional center, there may be some software that we choose not to use. And I think one of them was the emergency notification system. And there may have been something for the fire department, which I don't exactly remember. But my question is, if the board decides to go to the regional center, have there been decisions made to not use part of their technology suite? And if so, how were those decisions made? And then my comment will follow based on how that question is answered.
Okay, so the first part of what you just asked is if the board decides to do something, what will be the decisions about these modules? And the answer to that question is, first, do we need to have a formal vote about what we're going to do?
Mhm.
And then there's a year-long process of onboarding with the regional center,
Mhm.
during which there would be discussions about which of the modules we would want to participate in or not. So these aren't decisions that are made in advance. The main decision needs to be made. Which of the two options, beefing up our own system and increasing our personnel and finding a way of paying for all that.
Okay.
That's one option. And then the second option is the regional center. And so if the regional center were to be the option that we implemented, then the particular modules and those specific questions would be answered in the onboarding process.
Okay, thank you. The reason for my question was that it does impact the cost calculations for the regional center, because I know there were other things built into that, right? The coverage of the police station, et cetera. So there are costs that are built in. So that's why I was asking, have we already decided to use or not use certain modules? So that's good that a process would be, you'd go through a process to make all those decisions. That's good. My comment.
And Kathy, let me just add one thing to that.
Okay.
That if any of those processes, for any reason, involve the expenditure of town funds,
Mhm.
that would have to be brought before a vote of the town meeting. So we would have to have either a special town meeting or bring it up at annual town meeting, so that the money could be budgeted. Any money budgeted within the town has to be approved by the voters at town meeting,
Right.
including the monies to increase services to provide similar services to what the regional center can provide in-house.
Right. Okay. No, that's great. I just wanted to then make the comment that despite the municipal processes, et cetera, that need to be taken to appropriate funds, should the board decide to join a shared service like the regional center, it is a best practice to make sure that the board makes all final decisions about whether or not to deviate from the standard software and technology, et cetera, that the shared service will use. Otherwise you get into a situation where the savings could be unraveled over time. So it sounds like all of those decisions will eventually come before the board before it goes to the voters for, final appropriation, if I'm understanding correctly.
If there is any funds to be expended, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, could you please identify yourself and your street address?
Hi, Jeff. Mike Rossmarin, Crooked Lane, Manchester. I'm going to go through 4 very quick questions and then I'll get off. First one was the NSR 911, the feasibility studies they've all done, and all these towns are asking for feasibility studies. Have they ever said this is not feasible for you? Or have every one of those studies come back and said this is feasible for you?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. The question that I have following that would be, why have we not done a more current independent study?
A more current independent study of
whether it's feasible to go with 911. We've asked NSR to this survey, have we done a more current independent study?
That seems to me to be redundant.
911 is not independent. They're going to come back and say it's feasible.
Well, I don't know that they have done that in every case that a community has applied for a feasibility study. I haven't reviewed all the feasibility studies that they've done.
Okay,
And the question you're asking is an independent study.
yes,
What we know is what we want. What the board has done is defined what kind of a dispatch service do we want to see in Manchester by the Sea. We posed that question to North Shore 911, and they said, we can provide those services and this is what it would cost. So in terms of doing an independent study about whether they could in fact provide those services, that seems like a waste of public funds.
no, well, that's fine. All right, thank you. The second one question on the express concerns slide that was put up. You never once said of any of the express concerns that, gee, that's a legitimate concern, or I agree with that, or something like that. Every single one of them appears to be negated. The one that's not up there is that there really isn't a viable exit clause on this, and that's a very viable, and I know that Sue Harrington asked the same question. If we decided 1 year from now that we did not want to be part of this, or 2 years from now, we did not want to be part of this, that we can never go back to the situation that we currently have. Is that correct?
You know, I think we've asked and answered that question several times.
No, you have not answered it clearly. You've basically said we have to then join up with another town.
You asked if there was a viable exit strategy.
Yes,
And then separately, you asked whether there was an opportunity to get back our PFAS, excuse me, our PSAP. And those are two separate questions. The answer to the second question is when the decision is made to go into North Shore Regional and the actual contracts are signed, then we give up our PSAP. That's been stated a number of times as clearly as I just stated it.
okay.
The second issue is there a viable exit strategy? And that's been stated as well, which is the exit strategy would involve.
Yeah. All right.
Just a minute. The exit strategy would involve partnering with another entity, another community in our area that has a PSAP and negotiating an agreement with them as to how we would go about providing services and who would pay for what and how it would occur. That would be building from the ground up on our own.
Okay.
That is a strategy for exiting the regional center. But I don't think that that's an unclear strategy. It is a strategy for exit. And that's the way that we've been told and that we understand such a change could occur.
Okay, I appreciate that. And the question I have then is, what does the board expect to do with the data from the non-binding question? They're going to get data off of that. What do they expect to do with it? I like what Eli had to say, but I'd like to hear what the board is going to do with the data.
Mike, I can't predict what the data is the vote. And
Right.
I would not presume to predict what the select board would do with the outcome of this vote.
So there's
That's
no
a vote,
plan
that would be for me to say, this is how the select board will vote on this issue. And there are 5 select board members, and each one of those 5 has a vote. So
So by putting a
what you're
non-binding-
asking me to say is what's the select board going to do? Well, they would look at the vote and they would deliberate about it and they would make a decision.
Okay, so there was no, got it. All right, understood. And then
What did you
2029.
get?
What you just told me. What you told me is what I got.
What did you hear me tell you?
And 2029 and beyond, this contract goes to 2029 and beyond.
Mike, I just asked you a question. Can you
I know
answer?
you did. You don't ask me a question. I'm asking you the question right now.
Oh, I see.
Jeff,
Eli,
I'm in a different position from other board members. I'm not going to be on the board making that decision. May I say what my thinking would be to Mr. Rosemarin?
sure.
Please, Eli, thank you.
So as you said, it's a non-binding vote. And ultimately, the decision is of the Board of Selectmen. We're trying to obtain as best we can how residents would feel about this decision. So if it were a vote that came down to a 10-vote difference between yes and no, that would be a relatively unclear sort of outcome. And in that sort of a case, I think that the board, it's difficult to predict what the board would do, right? Because they're going to be in a position where they didn't get a clear indication from the residents about what they felt about these two particular options that were presented. There could very well be confusion among residents about what is being offered, especially from what I read out there and the way it's being presented politically. There are a lot of people saying just vote no. And they're not discussing what voting no really means. They're saying vote no, keep local dispatch local, but they're not saying vote no, improve local dispatch. So if the vote is really particularly close, it's not a very clear indication to the board whether or not people really understood the problem and the question, and whether or not they really what really the right way to go is. And then the board would probably make an independent decision. That's my guess, and that's the way I would approach it. If the vote is particularly strong one way or the other, it's my anticipation, it's my understanding and my belief based on the debate that we've had in the past that the board would execute on that, whatever that decision is. So if the vote were very strongly no, you would see the board turn right around and bring forth a measure before a town meeting to increase spending to increase our local dispatch support. And I don't know if that would be part of it as a supplementary budget spend or as part of a next year budget, but that is what would happen. And if it was the other way, the board would vote to go regional. That's what I think would happen. And that's what my position would be.
I appreciate that, and I really do, Eli. And my trouble that I have is that I truly am coming at this as a value neutral proposition right now. I can see the benefits and the curses of going with the 911. And I see our weaknesses and I see our strengths. And I feel that the biases are so strong coming from the board that every presentation that we have been given is basically a bias negating some legitimate concerns. That's a feeling I have. It's an opinion. It's nothing more than that. So I'm feeling that this has become somewhat of an emotional decision strictly because of the way data has been presented to us and the way that we are being talked to. So therefore it has become emotional. It doesn't need to be. I'd like to get it back more to data and facts. Thank you for answering that, Eli. I appreciate it.
We're trying pretty hard to keep it data and facts as much as we can. I will say that a lot of the debate in the public has been highly emotional, much more emotional than the debates I think that we've been having here.
Every debate is more emotional ever since the pandemic kicked in, and I get that. And that's people showing their good and their bad sides. And a lot of us are very smart people, just like you are. You're all members of our town. You're very smart people. We're very smart people. We can look at data. We can look at numbers. We can look at facts. We can't look at bias stuff. Everything is a confirmation bias to look at a buzzword. And everything has been presented to us to confirm that bias. That's how I personally feel. But I
Okay.
appreciate it, Eli. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Sandy?
Great. Sandy Rogers, 82 Old Essex Road. I have a couple questions. The first one has to do with, and I think the last speaker may have had this question and got off track, but it sounds like there is a contract that goes to 2029. At the last meeting, it was in what you've stated here, it'll take a year to get on board. So we're really looking at close to, six, maybe, 6 years and a couple months. What has been done to mitigate the town's risk after that time regarding the costs? Based on what I have read in 2018, the dispatch was underwater. It had a lot of issues. They were bailed out. Who's to say what will happen with growing costs? Any organization that is going into, pardon the word, outsourcing type of contract, a service type of contract, they weigh if they can go in or out based on the difficulty of bringing it back in-house. What has the town done to try to negotiate something, even if it's not a dedicated number, that there is a cap so that we know what our costs are going forward? A town has a long longevity, more than any organization. Has there been any effort to put a cap on the costs after 2029? Hello?
Yes.
Oh. You're thinking, okay. I thought my system had frozen.
I think the issue is identifying what those costs might be. And and in the past, in the long ago past, when the regional center was under the sheriff's department, there was a per capita cost for participation. And that per capita cost, and Greg, you might be able to help me with a specific number here, was far below what we were paying for our existing resources and our existing program. We have to keep in mind the choice that's being made here. The choice is it has to do with how do we address the structural problems with our dispatch system, and whether the regional system is the way to address it or the in-house system is the way to address it. There are costs. What we do know are what the costs are, or we can project the costs if we stay in-house and try to provide the services ourselves, and they're substantial. So what we'd be looking at is what kind of a per capita cost starting in 2029 and going through a 10-year contract might be imposed by the regional center to pay for costs, and compare that to what are the per capita costs that we have now, and what would they be under a comparable system for what the services are that the regional center can provide. So it's a very interesting question, Sandy. And I know that people are very anxious about the state coming down with very expensive costs in the future. But what we need to do is we need to codify on both sides of the question
And
What
has
the
that been done?
what the costs are. Well, it's hard to do on the state side because the state's saying that currently they're saying that the contract would be renewed under the same terms and conditions, which is no cost. But what we need to do is to project what the per capita cost that the state might assess that could be tolerated before it becomes so expensive that it's not worth going in the first
Yeah.
place.
Yeah,
And
so.
that would need to be compared against the costs that we have projected with remaining in-house and enhancing our system to change and decrease the structural deficits that exist in the system. I
Okay,
want to emphasize something I said very early on. This is not a critique of the actual dispatchers and their work. This is a critique of how do we cover these situations that require a second dispatcher and
right.
cover it in a way that adequately services our public safety personnel who are going out and putting their lives on the line for us.
Okay,
So
I think it is really important, I think it is very important that some of these scenarios get mapped out. That we need to be looking beyond just this decade, given how difficult it is to bring it back in. What could potentially happen? It would be great if they continue to cover everything at this particular contract's rates, but as things, like you said, a per capita, looking at what the state has done in the past regarding taking care of our housing, and that hasn't come to fruition, and now we have to upgrade the housing. It's just very important that we are prepared. So that would be one opinion. Second, this is a little bit more technical, but in looking at the numbers of the estimated budget for creating a safe lobby, one of the questions that is not answered, or one of the line items that's not answered, is the ongoing technical service that's going to be required for maintaining the lobby services, especially closed circuit types of cameras. Security cameras right now, they're very different, and they often need updating, which is a cost, but also the security, the cyber security behind it. If things go down, who's going to come and repair it immediately? It's especially important because the numbers that are estimated still are assuming that there may not be anyone in that lobby during a certain amount of hours, whether it be 6 hours or 8 hours or 4 hours, whatever the town decides and adjusts over time. So that technical assistance service, I didn't see on the cost estimates. And I'm just curious what work has been done to investigate that.
Okay. Your point is taken. And what I understood you to say is, what's the cost of maintaining the lobby connection? The $20,000 is not related to the lobby connection itself. The $20,000 is related to securing the lobby for when there's no one behind the desk at the police station. But the questions that you're raising are reasonable questions. Greg, you have your hand up.
Sure. Just so on that point of maintenance, for example, Essex has had this now for half a dozen years or so, and those ongoing maintenance costs have been covered by the regional center. So it's my understanding that they do provide that ongoing maintenance. Going back to the per capita cost projections. So when it was run by the sheriff's office, that cost was just north of $16 per capita. So in round figures, if they were to go back to that figure, it would be about $90,000 a year for us. If on a per capita basis, if we are doing in-house with two dispatchers, our per capita cost would be around $145 per capita. So even if the state doubled, even tripled its past cost, you would still be significantly below in terms of on a pure cost basis, regional versus in-house.
And that is based on population?
Yes, that's how they were charging in the
Yeah.
past. They were doing that on a population on a per capita basis. So they're, like I say, the sheriff was charging 16 and change per capita. And if you take the projection for us to do the in-house with the two dispatchers 24/7, that would be north of $145 per capita.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that information, Greg. And I guess it would be good to get clarified. It sounded like the center would potentially monitor the lobby, but what you're saying is that they will physically service the lobby. They will ensure that that our physical lobby in our town, and that they will be required to provide the cybersecurity services for our lobby, and that they will maintain the technical connections and everything else that we need. And the only cost that we will have is for like physical door, etc.
Correct, yes.
Okay. And that is in the contract?
I believe it is, yes.
Okay.
I'll double check, but yes, that's my
Okay.
understanding.
Okay, thank you very much.
Ann Harrison. And you need to unmute, please.
To Ann Harrison, 13 Tufts Point Road. To Sandy's question about funding and what our alternatives would be at the end of the contract, we do have the study that was done for joining a region with Danvers. There was a regional agreement between Hamilton and Wenham, which Wenham has left. But so we do have several studies that show how the costs of going to non-state run regions. And each of the studies has shown that it would be significantly less than continuing to run our own dispatch. So the other point is that Chief Cleary's letter in the Cricket today pointed out that there is a funding source for the state-run 911 regional centers, which is a tax on phone carriers for their connection to the 911 system. So this is not something that is entirely at the whim of the legislature. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Mr. Corin.
Thank you. I just have two questions on the ballot question. I believe it's in the bylaws that is specific in stating that for the question on the ballot, there needs to be a yes and a no answer, yes or no answer for that question. The way it's written up down at the bottom, you're asking for two different questions. One for the regional 9/11 and one to see if you want to support the town capital and operating cost as described above. And it's a bit confusing, and I think it's something that the board might look at to make it a lot clearer. The other thing is in the summary, it states in there that's guaranteed through 2029 and renewable through 2039 with the agreement of the parties. There's no guarantees. It's going to be negotiable right after 2029. That's after 6 years. And who knows what the state is going to come back with. And we're defenseless because we're stuck with the state. It'll never come back to Manchester by the sea. So I thank you for the time, and I hope that the board does review what's been presented here tonight. And I thank you for your consideration and look forward to an honest and open election on the 17th.
Okay. Sarah Melish.
Sarah Melish, 11 Bennett Street, and Chair of the Finance Committee. I think there's been a lot of talk tonight about the concern about a quote unquote dark station between midnight and 8 a.m. I think that people need to understand that if, as time goes on, they feel there's a need to staff that lobby between midnight and 8 a.m., the cost for doing that would still be substantially less than going to the regional 911 center. The impact on the tax rate of staying in-house will be significant. And the issue is do people want their increase doubled? Or do they want to rely on a regional center, which there are many across the state that have been operating for many, many years successfully? Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay. I want to thank everybody for the comments and questions that they've had. I believe that we've tried to stick as much as possible to the facts of the matter and to address the questions respectfully and with clarity. Seeing no further questions, we see a hand. Chief Cleary.
I just wanted to say a couple things. I think you covered things well. And I know on Facebook, there's been a lot of banter. I don't want to get down a rabbit hole. But point of fact, people brought out why haven't departments like Beverly and Gloucester gone. I've spoken with both chiefs. Their call volume's too big. They already have a robust dispatch center. And they both use Gamewell fire alarm systems, which the regional will not monitor, which is a system we used to have here in town and then we did get rid of. There was some insinuation that there's some sort of fire department vendetta or revenge ploy against the police department. And that is totally inaccurate. Chief Fitzgerald and I have talked several times on dispatch. We saw each other in the hall today. Fire and police work hand in hand on all the calls, and that couldn't be farther from the truth. People have talked about independent studies and have posted articles going back to 2009 when the dispatch center was run by the sheriff's office. citing Beverly's withdrawal and Rockport not wanting to join. Yet the 3 studies the town has done in 2019, 2015, and again in 2017 by MRI, all independent studies, have proposed that if available, the fire department should join a regional dispatch center. And one other item that hasn't been mentioned, with the effect on dispatch has on our ISO or our fire insurance rating. When we had our previous ISO rating, our current dispatch operations received a 2.5 out of a possible 10. And recently, when Topsfield, who belongs to the regional, had their ISO rating done, the regional scored an 8.5 out of 10, which has a direct effect to the overall ISO rating, which lowers the fire insurance rates for both residential and commercial properties. And that's primarily based on structure. It does not have to do with the quality of dispatcher or dispatching. It is a set checkoff list. And I know there was also conjecture that the fire department hasn't said anything or we're not vocal. I've tried to stick to the facts as my letter in the Cricket has stated. And we are available 24/7, and I'm here from Monday through Friday if anybody wants to call or come by or have a meeting with me. Happy to answer any and all questions. But I thank you for tonight, and I thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Chief Cleary. Okay, so this will conclude our dispatch forum number 5 on May 5th. The ballot question is on May 17th as part of the town elections. And we look forward to your participation in that ballot question, and hopefully that you bring to people that you know the information that you gleaned from tonight. There's no further comments from the board. I would entertain a motion to adjourn the Board of Selectmen, the Select Board, excuse me.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. Mr. Bowling,
Yep.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Round,
Yes.
and Becky Jakes could not be with us tonight. She is out of the country, or she would be here as well. The chair votes yes. Thank you for your participation.
Good night. Thank you.
Right.